Very good morning to all our dear listeners and viewers out there. Welcome to Acfim Talks. Let me start by apologizing for a late start. We've had a bit of a technical hiccup here and there, but nevertheless, we promise to be here every Friday, and yes, we are here. My name is Felix Kafuma, who is moderating today's edition of Acfim Talks, and we are discussing a very interesting topic. It's a follow-through of on our series that we promised to run with that are concerning the coffee unpopular coffee deal, and also the Luvoa the Luvoa Specialized Hospital, both contracts, big ticket contracts being handled by an Italian investor, Pinetti. And for the last almost coming to a month, the country has been awash and embroiled in these two scandals. It's publicly being debated. Parliament, media is reporting on the same subject, and we think we need also to continue having this discussion on Acfim Talks. But this time we look at an angle in a broader sense that speaks to procurement, the procurement, how procurement is handled in Uganda. And in this case, we are looking at what are the visible hands, what are the invisible hands. And under the title Pinetti, the visible hand in public procurement. So are we today discussing, and with me, I have a guest who is a usual guest, for Acfim Talks, Henry Muguzi, who is a political finance expert, also is the executive director of Alliance for Campaign Finance Monitoring. So it's good to have you, Henry. You're most welcome.
Thank you, Felix. And of course, these technical hitches always happen, but I hope we shall sail through. Good to be here.
Thank you so much, Henry. And for anybody out there who wants to be part of this discussion, please don't forget to subscribe on our YouTube. And we are live on YouTube. So yeah, the links are down there on the screen. We are also live on Facebook. Facebook, it's Acfim. YouTube, it's Acfim Uganda. And Twitter, pages at Acfim UG. And this, indeed, you can be part of this conversation. And every Friday, you'll be getting notifications so that you don't miss any of this. That whatever we will be bringing out to the public. And now, before we start, it's important that I kind of like lay a bit of a background to this discussion. We shall all agree and appreciate that the ultimate goal of public procurement is to satisfy the public interest, and like any government action should be, a good procurement should ideally satisfy, one, the needs of the people, should be fair to businesses, and most importantly, should save the waste of public funds. What also is important to note is that the latest figures on how much we lose to corruption, I think according to the IGG, is about 10 trillion, but 80% of that is lost to procurement. So that is why procurement is of interest when we are discussing this topic of Pinetti, because these two are procurement deals. Now, also what is important to understand and appreciate is the fact that in both these two procurement deals, single sourcing was preferred to competitive bidding, and which is not a one-off. We've seen this happen before. There have been precedents before, and I think we shall discuss that as well. But what does this mean when we subject this to the key ingredients that that should be observed that guide public procurement? Indeed, the questions of whether there was value for money, that is one. The questions of whether it was fair to business. The questions of whether these deals, we got the best deal that we were able to save taxpayers' money. And importantly, whether the procurement was in line with satisfying the needs of the people. And to get this started, like I said earlier, I have Henry Muguzi, who is going to help us put this into context, but also appreciate and discuss the whole Pinetti scandal within the procurement, public procurement, how it is managed, how it is handled, and what are the implications. Starting with and picking it off from that, let me actually ask Henry. Henry, I'm so sure that you've observed over time that single sourcing seems to be synonymous with big ticket procurement deals in Uganda. And we've seen the president often having the final say on who takes the contract. Uganda is awash with cases we can point to. The smart tracking project that involved the Russian firm, I think it was called Joint Stock Company, that handled the national ID project. Also, we had the Agua project. Now we have the coffee deal. Before we recover from the coffee deal, we still have the unfinished specialized children's hospital project. Why is it that when it comes to big ticket deals, single sourcing is the preferred format of procurement?
Thank you, Felix. And of course, to our viewers out there, when we speak about public procurement, we are speaking about a very important subject because for those of you out there who are not so familiar with the whole subject of procurement, when it comes to management of national resources, you know that national resources are managed through a budget, and the budget is a piece of legislation because it has to go through a process, and the final process requires an approval by Parliament. And the reason this is so is because there are guidelines, there are standards that are used to manage states. But when it comes to national budgets, and like the budget for the current budget we are working in is 45 trillion. It will be 47 for the financial year 2022-2023. But about close to 80% of the national budgets are expended through procurement, which is why you'll not be surprised to find that most of the corruption scandals, especially those that are grand in nature, have something to do in one way or the other with procurement. And therefore, also, then it should be also an area of concern for every citizen, because that's where your money is being expended. And that's where also the economic hitters, the hitmen, they call them economic hitmen, are targeting. Now, you spoke about the principles that are followed in procurement. Of course, standard practice requires that a country has a law that guides on how public procurement is conducted. And this law must also be guided by certain principles, among them transparency, because we are talking about people's resources. Therefore, they must be seen to be expended in a transparent manner. Number two, fairness. Because 80% of the national budget is expended through procurement, therefore, government plays a key role in ensuring that that procurement is distributed fairly, that all sections of the economy and the population get a fair share of that procurement in order for development to be balanced and well distributed. But also the other one is that there must be some semblance of economy, that you don't just spend money because you must spend them. You must show a degree of responsibility, but also due diligence, conducting due diligence and prudence as well, financial prudence in managing procurement. Now, the procurement law we have in place in Uganda, a procurement law called the Public Procurement and the Disposal of Assets Act, which was enacted in 2003. So we have an institution that enforces it, the Public Procurement and the Disposal of Public Assets Authority, headed by a chairperson. The technical head of it is the executive director. Now, in procurement, there are methods you can use that are prescribed by law. One of them is competitive bidding. Competitive bidding means you go out there and invite whoever has an interest to bid. But the law also allows you to do targeted bidding. Targeted bidding means that you want to procure a certain service or a good, and only a few suppliers can supply it all. The other suppliers have issues, and therefore you can tip a few, 3 or 4, to supply. But also there's one they call single sourcing. Single sourcing is that you don't have to advertise to call many interested parties to bid. You go for that person. But the principle is that single sourcing should be the exception, not the norm. What we are seeing in Uganda today is that single sourcing is becoming the norm rather than the exception. And the reason it is becoming so, and you rightly put it, if you look at most of these big ticket deals, you can start with the AGOA one, the one we are familiar with, where we had to procure an investor, I think represented by a certain Thai guy called Kananathan, and we were promised hell on earth. I mean, we were promised heaven on earth. Up to today, we have not. We are still questioning ourselves what happened with that deal. If we look at the deal for national IDs, the same thing happened. The deal for installing chips for tracking motor vehicles, which is being tagged, securitized, and classified, is single sourcing. And then now the notorious ones of Ruwawa. When the government wanted to procure the services of an international company to help set up and manage a specialized hospital, that went single sourcing. The coffee deal now has gone single sourcing. But you see, the thing is that in most of these deals where single sourcing has been applied, you get to see that there is also a strong underhand of the powers that be pushing this deal. Most of these deals where single sourcing has been applied have been confronted with resistance from legislators, a section of legislators, from a section of civil society actors, from a section of academia, but also other peace-loving Ugandans. Those that wish it well have criticized this, but you get to see that the president especially has a hand in it and pushes it personally, writes letters, and eventually the powers that be take the day. So the common thread running through these procurements where single sourcing is applied is that, number one, they are big ticket deals, meaning that huge volumes of money are involved. Number two, that they are faced with resistance where the president single-handedly pushes and eventually takes the day. So that's an area of concern. The first area of concern is that if it's the president who acts for and on behalf of the citizens of Uganda, and the reason that is so is because without seeking the mandate of the citizens of Uganda, he cannot govern, which is why every 5 years we go to election so that he can renew his mandate. If that mandate expired and he did not renew it, he won't have it. The Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, Section 1, Article 1 says that all power belongs to the people who shall exercise it by delegating. So he has delegated authority. Even when he comes out and says, I don't work for you, he knows. Because if you do not work for us, why do you have to come back to us every 5 years to seek re-election? So he knows that he serves us, and in the very interest of the people, you hold that power in trust, and you must exercise it in the interest of the people. But the people have been coming and saying, we don't want this deal, and they've been expressing their views through their elected leaders in the House, representatives in the House, but the president has always insisted. So that is a point of worry. Yeah, and that's why I want to leave it for now. The common thread that is running through, the breaches that are happening, the bigger question is, what is the interest? Because if you're not acting in the interest of the citizens who delegated their power to you, and to whom you return after every 5 years to renew your legitimacy and mandate, then whose interests are you serving?
Okay, thank you so much, Henry. There is when you were sharing something interesting. I kept asking myself, because you shared the principles, and I kept asking myself, okay, just looking at the coffee deal alone, was transparency exercised in the way the process was managed? Was fairness exercised? Was there fairness exercised? in terms of was there due diligence done? How was there prudence in the use of resources in making such decisions? And I'm asking myself, okay, if these are the principles that govern public procurement, if we are to subject these principles to the way the coffee deal or the specialized hospital deal was handled, how would you fare those two deals against these principles?
So thank you. When you look at how these two deals came into play and how the signings of the agreements was achieved, you'll see a breach of all these principles. You'll exercise, you pardon me where I am, there's quite some significant noise. So there was breach of the principles of fairness, because going single sourcing and insisting on a lady that has demonstrated by word and deed that she's not only incompetent to deliver the hospital that she promised, giving excuses that are lame, such as it was raining, such as there was COVID, as if there were no buildings rising during those periods, as if the rain was raining like tsunami. But then you insist and give her a deal in an area where she has no competence in. The truth must be told. If you go to me here, I am not a fisherman. So if you take me to do business in fishing, I'm just going to muddle through because that's not my area of specialization. So this person, I am sure if you show this person a coffee seedling, she will ask you, what is this? Because she has probably never seen one before. So you get a person that is coming to invest in a business they have never lived in, worked in. This is a joke. And so there was no fairness. That was breached. Transparency was breached because we do not know how this was arrived at. And you get to see how the deal is signed and the agitations to have it cancelled. And then there is arrogance and insistence that the deal cannot be cancelled, as if cancelling it would mean the end of the world, as if putting the deal in place would suddenly transform the lives of Ugandans. You look for the value add of this deal, you cannot find. You look at the bigger majority of citizens saying the deal is bad. You look at technocrats saying the deal is bad. You look at the manner in which institutions that are relevant and should have been consulted were sidelined, and ask you a set of questions for which you cannot find answers. And obviously, then you get to find one answers, and that answer.
I think I lost. Did I lose Henry? I think I lost Henry somehow in the process. You'll excuse us. I think where he is, there's a bit of the network is a bit erratic, but he was trying to subject the principles of procurement to the coffee deal, and I think we lost him out there as was trying to make a point around exercising issues of fairness, transparency. But I think also there's a bigger question of the due diligence, because information since then has been streaming through on who exactly is Pinetti, where have they done work before, the company called Finas, and what is their trail in terms of having done work in similar areas, and some of the information coming through does not necessarily comfort us or give us conviction or even give us confidence that Pinetti was under Finasi company was the best choice. In fact, in some of the literature that we've been accessing, you look at them and you realize that she has done work in other countries, but in some other countries, some of that work has been highly questionable. Her financial muscle has also been highly questionable. I think I think this week, whether Wednesday or Thursday, I think it was Wednesday, when it also came out to light that he actually never had the money, so he had to cash. He had to present the land which was given to as one of the incentives for this very I think under the lower deal, he was given land as an incentive and went and used it as collateral to access loans. And so even then, he never had the money. So you look at, if you subject these principles to the way these two procurements were handled, you really I think every Ugandan out there is justified to be alarmed. Whether we are really we got the best candidate for these two big projects, and whether we shall get value for money out of these two big projects. And I think that explains also why the public is up in arms, and almost everybody is contesting these two deals, especially I think the coffee deal has been one that has galvanized the entire public in uproar, and they're like, wait a minute, what is this we signed up for? And I think that's the point Henry was trying to make. As Henry gets back online, it's also important for me to point out some of the key facts surrounding the public procurement. In the bigger scheme of things, Pinetti is just an example of the other public procurements where somehow we've questioned whether the interests of the public are prioritized. When you look at the national ID project, I remember very well there was a Russian firm, I think it was a German firm initially that was given that contract, and I think almost close to a year down the road, they had only managed to produce under 1 million. I think they had about 700,000 or 500,000 national ID copies that had been produced, and yet it was also a deal that came through single sourcing, and they were trusted with public resources for a very huge project. And what happened is that eventually the project was now removed from that German company, and I think the security, the army, the security operatives took it over and have then manned it to where we are at the moment. And probably sometimes I think we also undermine the resident capacity within Uganda, and we then look for the so-called investors, Europeans, Americans, Asians, and I think and we tend to think that they can do a better job than the resident capacity that we have. And I think it's high time we really prioritized local in the local capacity. We need to appreciate, recognize, and award the local capacities, because when you look at the national ID, it's a very good example of a project given to a foreign firm that failed, and then until it was taken over by a local firm. Actually, it was taken over by the security, and they are until now, I think that they've done a much better job. And then also when you look at the now looking at the coffee deal, I think many coffee dealers have come up and said, but there's nothing Pinetti is going to do that we can't do. If you give us the same amount of incentives, we can do the same job, probably even do a better job. And that clearly shows you how sometimes government overlooks the resident, the local capacity, and clamors for I don't know, it's an inferiority complex. I don't know why in most cases we don't trust our own and we outsource, we go for foreign firms. Yet I think it's important we first look inward before we can look outward. I'm still waiting for Henry to get back online, but in the meantime, probably let's go for a break, and then we see how this pans out. Let's go for a break. Patra, take us for a break.
My people, a cup of coffee, please. There is tea, everything. Snacks are on the way.
Yeah, thanks, but the reason that's why we are here, our people need different services. We at least need an ambulance at every center.
My sub-county is the forest. We used to depend on the former MP's vehicle. But when he lost his elections, he took away his vehicle.
Of course.
So what does that mean?
Use your budget as a district to procure the ambulances.
Oh, if I could, I would. But unfortunately, government operates differently.
I'm saying, Chairperson, this is very serious and urgent.
Yes. And why are they called local leaders then?
Local government.
You people, who sent you here?
I know, of course. We are concerned citizens who are watching people dying every day.
We've lost our beloved ones just because of poor health services.
Something has to be done.
You are right. Something has to be done, and very fast.
Yes.
That's transport for you. Go back.
But
All your concerns are taken care of. I will handle.
But
Have a
Chairman,
safe journey.
Thank you so much.
but this man seems to undermine our cause as to why we're here.
No, don't misunderstand me. This is just transport, no strings attached.
Chairman, we came here to discuss and find solution to our problems. But it seems you don't want to engage with us. Let's go and mobilize people, and you'll see how serious we are.
Good citizens, let us always hold our leaders accountable. Leadership is a service, not a privilege.
Contribute today at www.politicalfinanceafrica.org/donate.
Welcome back from that short break. We were still navigating public procurement in light of the cases that have actually shaped, especially cases that involve colossal sums of money, and how they have shaped how government is handling public procurement. And in this case, I'll first throw the ball to government before we now eliminate the other arms of government and bring it home to who is responsible. But we were discussing, and an observation was being made that you see most of these, especially big ticket procurements, you see a common thread of single sourcing, but also a firm hand and influence of the head of state in terms of having the final say, but also defining who should be the beneficiary of that procurement. And I think it's now, of course, questions have been raised that when do we draw a line between influence peddling in procurement processes, and we all know that influence peddling is a form of corruption, and well-intentioned or well-intended presidential directives. When Henry gets back online, I think he's about to get back online, I think we'll be able to further circumvent that question, because well, I can argue that probably the president is acting in the best interest, since you've delegated responsibility and power and authority to him. He's acting in the best interest of the people of Uganda. So when he directs that you should give Farm A this business, he has looked at that farm and realized that my actions here are in the best interest of the people of Uganda. But now, sometimes those directives towards certain farms, they tend to backfire when, especially the farms that the president is vouching for, don't miss the mark or don't fulfill certain minimum requirements that can satisfy us as citizens. And I think, Henry, now that Henry is back, let me quickly throw this question. Henry, when does one draw a line between influence peddling and procurement processes, which is a form of corruption, and the well-intended presidential directives?
Thank you very much, Felix. And of course, it's regrettable that internet did what it did, but here we are. Now, that's a very good question. At what time does one draw the line clearly between influence peddling, which is a form of corruption? If you read the literature on corruption, they have classified corruption in two different forms. One of them is influence peddling. When a head of a government institution intervenes in taking decisions on who should be awarded which contract, that is illegal, is a breach. And it signifies a conflict of interest. It signifies that the one who is peddling interest has an ulterior motive. Now, the problem with the developing countries such as Uganda and many of our other colleagues in East Africa, who have always perennially been ranked among the most corrupt countries in the world, we have a problem, especially number one, if we have a regime in place that has overstayed in power, the tendency is always that either the office of the president or state house would become a clearing house for deals. And of course, these deals are needed because that money is important in as far as sustaining and financing the stay in power is concerned. We have seen it in South Africa. You shall recall that at the time a vote of no confidence was cast in Jacob Zuma as president of the Republic of South Africa, office of the president had become a clearing house for deals. At the time Ndugu Mugabe was being thrown out, one of the accusations was that the office of the president had become a clearing house for deals. During the days of Kanu, the late Daniel Arap Moi was being accused of turning State House or the office of the president into a clearing house for deals. This is what we are seeing in Uganda. So when State House becomes a clearing house for deals, and by the way, there's something about State House. We have always said that the principle that was handed down to us by the colonial masters were that the man or woman that occupies the office of the president shall have two places of living. The first one, the place where he or she stays, which was given the name State House, and the place where they work from, which is the office of the president. All the work of the man or woman that occupies the office of the president has to be done in the office of the president. State House is where they go to rest and meet their own people, private people, and so on. In the case of Uganda, we are seeing increasingly that the budget allocation to State House is ×3 the budget of the office of the president. In other words, work that would have been done in the office of the president is being done in State House, which is a distortion of management of public affairs. Now, anybody can argue otherwise. This is my opinion. And this is opinion also informed by international best practice. So State House became a clearing house for deals, which is why you are going to see that the deals of Pinetti we are talking about, the State House has a hand, the president himself has written to the speaker and said this must be. So it's difficult now to draw the line, because whereas as a fountain of honor, as a person whom Ugandans have bestowed power and conferred their power to be governed, when they went to the ballots, the votes, the elections in 2021, of course, is supposed to be superintending over all the business of the country. But does that then give you license to peddle, influence? I mean, to interfere and descend into the arena to the extent that you are determining who gets what deal? I think that is wrong. The practice should have been that there should be institutions which are manned by technocrats that are grounded extensively on matters of the state and statecraft, that conduct due diligence. First of all, they develop the national development plans. Then they break them down to plans of ministries, departments, and agencies, and then to annual plans, which are funded by the annual budget. And they are the ones who identify which direction the country shall go. Your role as a president is to govern as the executive. It's like, as head of the home, you have bought meat home, but you also want to participate in taking the decisions in who gets what piece of meat. I think it has to be clear here that the head of state has overstepped the boundary. Yes, he has powers, and it's a contingent on him as head of state to make sure that the national resources are governed in the best possible way. Yes, it is true that we have thieves and looters among the technocracy, in which case you can give an excuse that, oh, I don't trust them, but that you are the one who is identifying the woman Pinetti and writing letters and putting your weight on the line for this woman. I think we are staring in the face of influence peddling, which is a form of corruption. I think these are actions we should study seriously. I think that the head of state and the advisors that he has should be able to look at this instead of the likes of the Attorney General, the Minister of Finance, and others defending this deal as if their life depends on it. I think it's important to tell the president the truth, that it is important sometimes to keep your in exercise of your mandate as head of state and fountain of honor. It's sometimes some things are better off being left at arm's length. So I want to conclude by saying that in this case, this deal has all the trappings of influence peddling, that is a form of corruption, and that the president should have done this a different way. And if the rest of the citizens and their representatives have raised a red flag, there is no justification for the president now to again go ahead and insist on defending the lady Pinetti as if the resources, as if the country Uganda belongs to Pinetti. The country Uganda belongs to Ugandans, not to an individual. The country Uganda does not belong to the president. There was Uganda before the current president. There shall be Uganda after the current president. Uganda stays, and therefore the interest of the people of Uganda should be reigning supreme. That is my opinion.
Okay. Okay. That you've had Henry share his opinion on that one, but again, the fact that the president, the office of the president, which is now more or less the state house, is taking over or is managing procurements. It raises a question in this case, in view of what's happening, is the entity, the authority, the public procurement and disposal of assets, the authority that is mandated under the PPDA Act of 2000, I think it's 2003, as an institution. Is it to manage all forms of procurement, including the ones that may provide room for single sourcing, under which these two are categorized, or under which these two were handled? Does that then mean, apart from the classified ones, does this then mean that, okay, where do we place PPDA
I think I can proceed from here. So the institution Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Assets Authority, which is established, which is a statutory institution established by Act of Parliament with the responsibility of superintending over all forms of public procurement, does not seem to be, relevant in this particular aspect. And when you look at this critically, you get to see that PPDA is suffering from the same malaise that the other institutions are suffering from. And that malaise is the dysfunctionality that has been occasioned by the captivity of these institutions, the captivity that has been in place for the longest period now. PPDA doesn't even get to be mentioned anywhere. I don't know whether they signed off to this. The law says that in the case of single sourcing, of course, the head of state, his word can be law and can override these laws. But in a situation where you are constructing a facility for the country, where you are doing things for public interest, and you don't involve the public institutions, what message are you sending across? As the head of state, your responsibility is to ensure that you put in place a functional institutional mechanism, that institutions are working. But for us in Uganda today, what we are seeing is that we have individuals taking over, okay, from institutions. Individuals being stronger than institutions, institutions no longer working, institutions being dysfunctionalized, and all these are necessary concomitants of state capture. And therefore, I think if I was Parliament, I would be putting PPDA to us to task to explain what their role was, but I should also be putting the executive to task to explain why in all this dealing, they have sidelined the institution that is mandated by Act of Parliament to handle public procurements in the interest of Ugandans. Back to you, Felix.
Thank you so much, Henry. Sorry, I briefly went off. I think we have having a connection challenges, but I'm glad that you picked the question, even when I was a bit unclear, you were able to pick it up and run with it. But in view of the above, I would want to know, because until yesterday, it's very clear that public opinion, also as expressed through the MPs that are handling the probe into this matter, you realize that almost everybody is agreeing on one thing, that these are deals gone wrong. But you have the Attorney General, you have the Minister of Finance, especially those two, defending these two deals like their lives depend on these deals. They are defending these two deals in a manner that you question where they get all this gusto, this passion, this commitment to go against the majority. So it's more of the minority versus the majority. And is there something they are seeing we can't see, the rest of us can't see, the majority of us can't see? Henry?
You see, that is the question that many Ugandans are asking themselves. Why is the Attorney General, why is the Minister of Finance and others defending this deal as if their lives depend on it? What is it that they see that we do not see? The challenge we are having as Uganda is that our institutions are devoid of people, men and women, strong enough to say no to wrong practices, strong enough to say this is wrong, this is right, strong enough to say this is unacceptable behavior. So what we have now are people who have decided to appease the appointing authority, because there is no way the technocracy would absolve itself of this matter. There is no reason why the Attorney General is insisting. But when you look at it critically, it's as if he's trying to appease the appointing authority. I think what we've seen for the longest time is that when men and women are appointed by the president, they get this feeling as if he has done them a favor. You get one to think they're acting as if they are individuals who have never dreamt. You see, if someone has never dreamt about becoming Attorney General, and suddenly they become. If someone had never dreamt about becoming Minister of Finance, and suddenly somebody becomes, so they remain forever beholden to the person that has appointed them and helped them to achieve that. We can argue that probably that is the driving force behind them fighting to be seen to be defending the deal as if their lives depend on it. And I think this whole business of trying to appease the individual of the president that has appointed, and trying sometimes even to read between lines and debate between themselves over what would please him and what would displease him, is the whole problem of this country. You recall there was a time, I think in 2016, when the Attorney General then was giving an opinion over whether or not Kizza Besigye should be nominated, because he was being he was facing charges, and I think it was 2011 for sure, not 2016, 2011. So in 2011, the Attorney General then, who we know had a PhD in jurisprudence, had advised that some people can be more innocent than others, and therefore Besigye cannot be nominated. But true to the Electoral Commission, they had the legal officer that was sane enough, who advised that there's nothing in law that stops the Electoral Commission from nominating Kizza Besigye, and Kizza Besigye was nominated. But you see, the legal officer of the Electoral Commission then was a junior officer in the area of jurisprudence. And here you had an Attorney General who has a PhD in jurisprudence giving advice to government that was really wanting. And then you ask yourself, what happens to these good, intelligent men and women when they get to be appointed into government offices? So it takes you back to the whole notion of trying to appease and being seen to be appeasing and pleasing and rewarding the appointing authority, even when it is not necessary. In this case, I think it's important to understand that the bigger picture is the general interest of Ugandans and what Uganda wants. So I think that's why they behave the way they are behaving, to appease the appointing authority.
Thank you so much, Henry, for throwing light to a question disturbing many Ugandans, because truth be told is that we've seen a force of two against the population of, we are 45 million? Yeah, I think, yeah, it's a force of two against the population of 45 million Ugandans. And I think that's quite absurd. And well, let's see how far this goes. And probably, I think it's also a test of our democracy, whether the majority rule the day. Our time, we have about 10 minutes to get out of here, but I can also open up, I can open up our program to anybody out there who has a question, who has a comment, a clarity, anything that you want us to respond to. Like I said, you can be part of this conversation on our social media platforms and on our YouTube. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Facebook. We are live on Twitter. You can send in your questions, and we'll be very, very happy to answer them. All comments or any additions to make this conversation very, very fruitful. My other question to you, Henry, is about the issue of concerning these shady procurements, the few that we've mentioned, there are quite many, but there are those that stand out, like the National ID project, the AGOA project. Now we have the Kofi Gill and the Specialized Children's Hospital project. I think also the Smart Tracking project. But there's something interesting when you look at all these projects that have always been controversy that have always caused controversy within the public.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I think I'm back.
You're back.
Let me make my question. I was saying that I've not seen such tax waivers extended to local farms, but also you realize that another common phenomenon is that most of these procurements are signposted as emergency and classified, more or less to try to obscure public scrutiny. I want to understand what's your take when you look at the way most of these public procurements span out.
Yeah, thank you for that one, because as you were presenting, I remembered that in the deal for AGOA, there was a woman called, I think, Rosa Whittaker, who was fronted, and the way she was being marketed before Ugandans was like we were getting honey and milk out of this woman. She was the overall connector, and that through him we are going to export a lot. In fact, many of the Ugandans started imagining, that now we are going to see the end of putting on second-hand clothes, because then the apparels that we are going to produce for AGOA, the remainders or those which have damage that can't be exported will flood our market, and suddenly we'll see the end to this. So that was a foreign, I think she was an American. In this case, you are seeing Pinetti, the Italian. Of course, you can even question her Italianism, but that's not me to do. But the Italian has come. They are foreigners. She's a foreigner. She's being accorded unbelievable concessions, tax waivers, government promissory notes, and then she's able to cash them at will. For 3 years, there's now work going on. Okay, maybe there's 10% of the work, but she has cashed about 47% of the money, which is questionable and can be a crime. And then still the president is insisting on defending her. She's been given land. She's been given an industrial park in Amamve, and basically the deal she's facing is too good to be true. But on the contrary, when you look at our local coffee farmers,
I think we lost Henry in the process. I think he was trying to break down the nature of investors concerning the procurements that have often been the eye of the storm, that are, we quote unquote the shady procurements. He was trying to lay case on the character of these procurements and why is it that we have such procurements signposted against certain threshold of amounts of money, usually what we call the big ticket procurement deals. They tend to have certain characteristics of one is a foreign firm that is a beneficiary, and also the fact that they enjoy a lot of concessions, tax waivers that follow through, and then they are classified as emergency. They are also classified to more or less to be. Some of them are signposted to be of security in nature. So some of there is less public scrutiny to these procurements, and we wanted to make sense of why all these procurements, all of them have have the same shade. You know, we always have that saying that if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's definitely a duck. I hope we can have him back on to really drive this point home, because I'm so sure there are many people out there who are trying to connect the dots on when it comes to how we manage public procurements of such nature, and the common elements that cut through on the beneficiaries of such procurements, and also how eventually most of them end up. And what should we then, if we can use this, what should we then expect? What is the end in mind on how will this end? This, I know there is a probe ongoing on the now currently it's the Pinetti coffee plus the lower deal. Where does this, how is it going to end? Looking at those common threads. Henry is back online. Henry, can you please proceed?
Yeah, so the answers to this question can also be found in the nature of the in the manner in which we finance our politics and how we are sustaining the regimes in power. Because it's easier to work through an intermediary that is foreign if you're going to have to find a way of sustaining the regimes. We've seen this in Kenya through Anglo-leasing, but also the Golden Back Scan. We've seen this with the Gupta family. In fact, the interesting thing of the Gupta family is that they came with nothing, and now they are super wealthy. So we are seeing such things happening here. And of course, it is regrettable that it is foreigners that do not seem to be, cannot be more patriotic than Ugandans themselves. The question is, the issue is the learning we should be picking from this, that it's important for us to be able to encourage and support more of Ugandan investors, the ones that are grounded in the areas. We are not short of Ugandans that were investing already in the medical industry. We are not short of Ugandans who are already investing in the coffee industry. Why did we not support those? Why go for foreigners? So these are some of the things we need to learn from in order for us to ensure that the capital goes forward. But also we need to listen sometimes to the people. If the bigger majority are saying we know to the deal, why do you cling on to it? If the woman has demonstrated by word and deed with Rubowa that she cannot manage these things, why do you then again add a coffee deal? What do you know that we don't know? What is are you chasing? What is the thing behind the thing? So these are some of the questions that citizens are looking at. And I think it's important that at this day and time for our leaders to listen to the people and listen to the people's views, but also try to listen to the sense, appeal to the sense of reason, so that they do things that are defensible. In my own view, the deals around the Pinetti are indefensible, but also it's clear that there is an invisible hand that is hidden behind Pinetti. It's also clear that Pinetti is just a financial intermediary. And therefore, in Uganda, they call it Kayungirizi. And therefore, we need to dig deeper to understand who are the beneficial owners, who are the beneficiaries of some of these deals. Those are some of the lessons we should draw. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Henry. And indeed, I'm not going to add on that because we are at the top of the hour. I think allow me to bring this to a close. You've heard it from Henry himself, and I think it's important that as Ugandans, we interest ourselves in how this is all spanning out. And I'm glad that the media has been at the forefront of churning out so much information about the visible hand in the public procurement involving Pinetti at the moment. Thank you so much, Henry, for being part of this conversation. My name is Felix, who was moderating today's show, and I'm bringing it to a close till next week, same time. Bye-bye, and then stay safe. All the best. where you're supposed to put the money.